When I set out to make this video and do a comparison between the Wolf Eyes Range 56 IR light and my original Infiray IR light, I didn't realise how difficult it's going to be. While both torches work really well, it depends on the conditions that they're being used in. Is there no moonlight? Is there half a moon? Is there a full moon? Are there stars out? Is there cloud cover and it's completely black? That makes a difference. Unfortunately, I'm not able to test these side by side because this one has failed, and that's the reason why I bought this one. That would be the ideal way to show you the differences. But all I can do is look back through some footage. There's hours and hours. So I'll try and get something that's really similar, what this was being used at and what this one was being used at, and show you the difference. But after using this one for about, I think, 3.5 years and this one for 6 months, I can definitely say this is a better torch. Now first up, let's just weigh these two units. Now both of them actually have a battery in them at the moment, and they have the brackets on them. The only difference that's going to be is the Ranger one actually has a small Picatinny mount that's also on the scope, so that'll be a couple of grams extra. But if we put that on with battery and mounting bracket, we've got 399 grams, so it's got a bit of weight to it. The Infra Red Torch has the bracket on there which goes directly onto the scope, so there's no extra. It also has a battery in there. And we've got 278 grams. So there's quite a bit of difference in the weight of these two units. Okay, now we'll just do a few quick measurements. The Infra Red Torch, it's 22mm diameter, where this one is 25. Now the 56mm, from what I can work out, comes from the measurement on the outside. If we go to the inside, it measures around 45mm. The Infiray one, around the outside, is 44, whereas the inside is around 35. Infiray is about 165mm long, while the Wolf Eyes is around 183. Sorry to interrupt, but I do have some merchandise for sale. T-shirts, caps, stubby coolers, and stickers. You can send me an email to SWYD243@outlook.com, or you can scan this QR code. Now I did have to buy a different mounting system for this, and it comes in two pieces. There's a quick release mount on the torch, as well as a Picatinny rail mount that is permanently fixed to the scope. The mount for the Infiray came with the torch. It's also quick release, but it wraps straight around the scope and clips on quite easily. The quick release mount that goes on the Picatinny rail also has some plastic inserts. The plastic inserts are slightly different thicknesses and they can go in either way, and that allows you to fine tune the beam of the light to match up with the reticle on your scope. The good thing about this mounting system is once it's on there, it does not move. The mounting system for the Infiray has a slight ball joint inside of it, and although you can move it around, it's quite stiff. You can tighten that up, but I did find quite a few failures with this over time when the torch ended up moving under recoil. The ball joint mount can be tightened, however sometimes it wasn't quite tight enough when you're a bit cautious about stripping out the screws, and the torch would move under recoil from the rifle. Other times I'd accidentally bump the torch in the buggy and pushed it to one side, and you can see that in one of these videos. So initially I thought the ball joint mount was a great idea, but after using it for a while it does have some failures, and now I much prefer the quick release mount. I prefer to use a night vision scope on my rifle along with an infrared torch. It gives me much better target identification than what a thermal does, unless you spend tens of thousands of dollars on a thermal. In my opinion, it's just not quite as good. And all the properties I shoot on, they all have livestock, and I need to identify what I'm going to pull the trigger on before I do it. Now, an advantage of using a thermal scope is you're going off a heat signature, and as long as you can get line of sight to that through grass, trees, thistles, sticks, etc., you're going to see an image. How much of that image you can see and how accurately you can pick out your target depends on the situation, but it can be a disadvantage when using night vision with an infrared torch. Particularly when the torch is on, it tends to light up anything in the foreground. So if you've got fencing wire, light grass, thistles, etc., the torch hits it, it makes it really bright and white. The camera inside the night vision scope adjusts the sensors, it changes the shutter speed, the aperture and the ISO, and therefore the image in the background becomes much darker because it's trying to not overexpose the image in the foreground. So having a really bright infrared torch is not always a good thing because it puts so much light out there, it changes the camera, you can't see what's behind the grass, makes it really difficult to shoot. So what I will do, I'll show you some images from my thermal monocular, and you can see this pig. Now he's laying down behind some thistles. When I look through with the night vision scope, you just can't quite make it out. It lights up the thistles you can't see. The black mass in the middle of the screen is actually a pig hiding in some thistles. When I look through the night vision scope, you just cannot see it. The torch is lighting up the thistles, can't see the pig at all. Even with the thermal, it doesn't really look like a pig. However, I'd identified it earlier as it walked into that area of thistles. So now he's moved just a little bit, and I've got some logs in the background for reference, so I know exactly where that pig is. I look through with the rifle again, with the night vision scope, and I just cannot see it. You can see the logs in the background for reference, so I know I'm in the right area. I scan around, can't find him anywhere. So let me show you some examples of how night vision can be quite difficult to identify a target in certain circumstances. Now in this screen I spotted some pigs in the background using the thermal, but again looking through the night vision scope, with the grass lighting up in front of me, I cannot see what's behind it. There you can see the pigs again with the thermal. The heat signature is quite obvious, however with the night vision scope, I lift it up, I can just see a bit of background there, and then finally you can see the pig come through. The long grass makes it so much harder with night vision. There's the thermal, there's the pigs, we can see them. Switch back to the rifle, can't see the pigs until just at the last minute. So that's one area where a thermal scope will be so much better, but only once you've identified your target. Now let's have a look at the infrared mounted on the night vision scope. It's just off to one side on the right hand side, so I can still access the turret on the top, which I can do adjustments with my scope. With the extra weight of the Ranger torch, I decided to mount it directly above the scope, with the Picatinny rail lifting it up a little bit higher. That gave me access to the turret on the top of the scope, so I can still do my adjustments. Now this is the old torch with a spot beam and close range pig. You can see how the torch dulls a little bit after impact. Again, close range and a spot beam. Now for comparison, this is the new Ranger torch, a pig at close range with a spot beam. Notice when we fire the shot, it doesn't seem to change. Now this is the old torch. This is a pig at sort of medium range, but watch what happens to the torch after the impact. You can see there that the spot beam has dropped down as the torch has moved in its mount. I line up for the second shot, and the torch moves even further. So it's getting a little bit hard to see. I'm trying to reload a new bullet, line up for the third shot, and the torch is just about out of the picture now. Then I've had to grab the torch, push it in the mount to lift it up so I can look around for a further shot. And when you accidentally bump the torch inside the buggy and you don't realise, this is what it looks like when you finally get the rifle out. I spotted two boars fighting down at the paddock on the other side of that fence. They were 220 yards away. I know that because when I went down after I shot the pig, I was able to pace it on the way back. So this is using my old torch on a spot beam, 220 yards at a pig. And as you can see, when the shot goes off, the torch actually dims. So for comparison, this is the Ranger on spot beam. These pigs are sort of medium level, but you can see the grass lighting up in the front. But we do get a shot away, and you can see the identification of these pigs. You can even see the different colours in them. The other pigs in the background are around 200 yards away. Now, although it's lighting up the foreground, I can still see those pigs in the background quite easily. Now, with the old light at 220 yards, this is what pigs look like. You can just see that difference. It's just not as clear. The light doesn't travel as far. This pig is 20 yards away and thinks he's hiding in the bushes. This is the old light, close range. But once again, you can see the torch start to move in the mounting bracket. The best way to test these two torches would be put them on the rifle, same night, same conditions, and go through adjustments with one torch and then the next torch, and you can see the difference between the two. Now, because this one's failed, I'm not in a position to do that. What I will do is I'll go outside during the day. I'll take some measurements with a laser rangefinder to some trees and a pole. So we've got a variation between, I think, about 40 yards up to 220 yards. And then I'll come back, stand in exactly the same spot, look through the scope at night time, and I'll use this torch. And I'll also go from wide beam down to spot beam, and you'll see that beam come in the frame. Now, one thing to remember is on the video that you see on the screen, you can see that light come in. You can't always see that on the rifle scope itself because the field of view is just a little bit smaller, And I can normally see when it gets right down to pencil, but when I was using this torch on a pencil beam, I couldn't actually notice any difference at all until I came back and looked at it on the video.
That tree is 35 yards. The power pole is 75 yards. The bushy tree over there is 140 yards. And the tree right down the end is 220 yards. That one there.
So this is all done with a Ranger 56 light. You can see we go from pencil beam, open it up to wide beam, and you can see the difference that it makes in the camera. 75 yards, we've gone from wide beam, and we'll bring it down to pencil. And it does take the camera a little time to adjust to the different lighting. At 140 yards, we've got wide beam. Now we'll bring it down to pencil or a spot beam. And you can see how much it changes. Turn the light off, that's how dark it is. And it takes a fraction of a second for that camera to make its adjustments and focus on that tree. Wide beam at 220 yards. And then we'll bring it down to pencil and it lights up further. But you can see that that's so much better than that original one where those two pigs were fighting at 220 yards. Overall, pretty happy with this torch. It's so much quicker to go from wide to pencil beam. The Ranger 56 gives you two options on charging the battery. You can remove it and put it in a designated battery charger, or if you turn this rubber ring around, you can see the USB-C port to be able to charge the battery without removing it. If you remove the cap and have a look at this battery, you'll see that it's an LPB168A, which is slightly bigger than your standard 18650 battery. The Infra Red Torch uses an 18650 battery, and you can see here the difference in size. However, even with a smaller 18650 battery, the spring inside the Ranger 56 torch has enough capacity to be able to use that battery as well. So I've never needed more than one battery during the night, but if I do need to, I have my spare 18650 battery. The Wolf Eyes battery does go in the Infra Red Torch, however you can see that the end cap doesn't screw up properly. And this is the adjustment I was talking about for the intensity of your light, which is a good feature, and maybe I'll buy that additional end cap for my Ranger 56. The Ranger 56 I purchased does come with a designated tape switch, and I thought this would be a good idea. You screw it in the back there. It has two sections on this tape that are little flat momentary switches, which means when you push, the light comes on. When you release the pressure, the light goes off. For my application, I don't really like the tape switch. I'd rather have a push button and keep it on because I never know how quickly I need to fire a shot, and I don't need to be reaching around my rifle trying to find a tape switch. Now to change from wide beam to spot beam or pencil beam, the Ranger 56 is much quicker, with less than 1.5 rotations to go from pencil beam to wide beam. The Infra Red Torch also goes from pencil beam to wide beam, but the difference being this thing takes 3 3/4 rotations to go from one to the other, which is quite slow when you're in the heat of the moment and you want to quickly adjust the torch. Okay, so after using this torch for about 6 months, I really do like it. I think the light is brighter, it travels further, and it just seems to work really well with my rifle scope. The features I do like about it, although I did have to buy a different mounting system for it, I've got the pick rail that goes around the scope and then a quick release one on here. It does make it easier to come on and off, but once that's clipped on, it goes really well. Had no problems with it at all. It doesn't move during recoil and it doesn't get bumped when you're around in the buggy. Another feature on this torch that I really do like is the ability to go from wide beam down to spot beam very quickly. When you turn that, it's less than a turn and a half. Compare that to the Infra Red Torch, it still has a variation between wide beam and spot beam, but that's almost 4 rotations. It's 3 3/4 rotations of the bezel there to get it out. So when you're in a hurry, That's not so good. This one works really well. So what didn't I like about this torch? Well, one of the things is the little cap on the end of the tape switch. It just pops off all the time. So in some ways, I wish that was a bit more of a permanent fix because I don't use a tape switch. It doesn't suit my application. Now, another downside of this torch is actually the weight. However, you just get used to it. If you want good quality glass on there, you're going to have some weight. It's got a brass insert there and the rest of it's aluminium, so it's about as light as it can be, but it does add some more weight to your unit. Now, one thing this torch doesn't have is the ability to dim the light. On the rear of the Infiray switch, there is 3 adjustments, which I showed earlier, so that shows the intensity of the light. This one doesn't have it, however, there is a solution. They do sell a different end cap for this, and then you can have an adjustment so you can have the brightness there. That may be something I'll look into because when I get those situations where there's long grass and something lighting up in the foreground and I'm trying to see pigs in the background, perhaps having an intensity may fix that. So it could be something I'll look at in the future and I'll let you know how I go with that. Well, if you made it this far into the video, congratulations. Do yourself a favour and hit the subscribe button and see what we get up to next. Thanks for watching. Hope you like the review of the Wolfeyes Ranger 56 infrared light in 850 nanometers. Catch you in the next one.